Welcome back to Legacy Leaders. This is Juan.
This is Ben.
Today's culture, perspective, a little bit of everything. Some of us grew up in environments where words were weapons. You were called stupid, soft, weak, not enough, and now you're in a position of leadership. The question is, are your words building people or are they breaking them? Legacy leaders don't just build businesses, they build people, and people are built with words.
Yeah, I mean, people build your brand. People build your business. I tell people a lot of times when we're building our brand and our people and our culture and our companies, it's really comes down to one thing. It's building relationships.
Yep.
You build relationships and communication, everything else is easy. I don't care if you're selling cars, steaks, if you're in business or technology or computer or AI or whatever it is, everything we do is centered around people. If there's no people, there's no business. So it all starts with building relationships and communication. That comes down to the culture piece of it, So I think we work at a company where Ken Taylor really kind of founded that, man. He kind of ingrained that. So if you've been with that company a long time, he says things like, hey, we're a people first company that happens to serve steaks. And that mentality, that kind of breeds into the culture of the business we work in. But there's cultures all around the world that have that same mentality. You look at Richard Branson, and he's all about his people too. Yeah. So his company with Virgin Mobile and Virgin Flight Lines and all his company, I mean, you look at what he's done, man. He's up there with Elon Musk and he's a billionaire, and he built it based off of taking care of people. Extended PTOs and things like that. So culture's a big one. And it should be talked about in business, but all organizations, not even just business. It should be talked about in churches. It should be talked about in different groups like the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whatever it is. Culture really breeds the environment for people to relax and have fun and like what they do. And if you like what you do, you're gonna put effort into it, and you're gonna try harder.
And culture is super important. It's either gonna break you or make you. If your people ain't bought in with the environment that you're bringing them, people ain't going to work. And if you ain't got the vision to bring them that, you're lost. It says there's that. It says it in the Bible. When the people lose a vision, people perish. So it's super important to bring that culture, that environment. Have some fun. Don't take your job too serious sometimes. Be able to coach. But coach in the right way. Build the people up with words of encouragement. We grew up, you can say, and sometimes probably a hostile environment, right? Where we were told shit. We were told things, and probably part of our vocabulary is the way it is because we grew up saying F this and F that, F you, this and that, And hearing those words as a kid just stuck to us. Parents telling us sometimes, hey, are you dumb? And sometimes it's like, they probably don't know, but they think it's the word. But eventually you tell someone so many times that they question themselves. They're like, am I really dumb?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else we've talked about in previous episodes as far as like what you say to yourself and positive affirmations and things like that. I mean, if you tell someone that they're dumb over and over and over, they're gonna think they're dumb. So it's really about building people up. It's not about breaking people down. I mean, there's still accountability. Yeah. There still has to be accountability. So if you're messing something up, you need to be able to wrap your arm around someone and say, hey, you're not walking in the right path or you're not doing the right things. But we need to build them up and show them the why. Yeah. The communication is 90% of the problem, the majority of the time. And it starts with that vision. And for you to have good culture, first you got to set that vision, like you said. Yeah. Without vision, we'll perish. And without vision, everyone pulls in different directions. Yes. So to build a core foundation for your culture, you have to first and foremost make that vision crystal clear. It has to be so clear that you can go to anyone on your team and ask them, and it doesn't matter what their position is. They could be the bottom level, or they could be the CEO, and everyone has that crystal clear vision of what you're trying to obtain. So that's why companies come up with little catchphrases and their cliche, sayings and, basically verbiage to dialogue or to represent the culture. And so you have to have those things in order to have a clear message. And I think that a lot of companies don't do a good job of that, or they make them way too long. Like their vision is this 2-paragraph thing, right? And it's like, hey, recite the mission statement for this company, and you're like 2 paragraphs in, nobody's gonna remember that stuff, man.
Most definitely not.
Keep it short, keep it to the point, but keep a broad vision, but make it crystal clear on how to get to that vision.
Let's get into it. Words create identity. Leadership isn't just strategy; it's language. The way you speak to your team becomes the way they speak to themselves. What you constantly call someone, they eventually believe. Culture isn't created by posters on the wall. It's created by conversations in the room.
Yeah, conversations is what starts it. Posters are a tool. Posters are a tool to keep it visual and keep things front and center and keep it in your face so that you don't forget the culture. But the culture itself is driven by the conversations. It's by treating people correctly, and it's by, when you have those interactions, making it about the individual and how they add value to that culture. It's not always about what's best for the company. As a whole, we want what's best for the company. But in order to get that, you have to value each team member specifically for who they are and their role in it, right? You can't take the quarterback and go make him a defensive lineman. That ain't going to work. So everyone has a role to play. So the culture's, I used to tell people it's kind of like the spokes in a wheel, right? Everyone has to do their job. If all the spokes are in the wheel and they're all doing their job, you got balance. Things are rolling great, right? You pop one of those spokes out of a wheel, what happens? Starts shifting on you, right? So everyone has to own their part of it for that culture, but you have to be crystal clear in what their role is, and that comes down to that communication. But in order for people to have buy-in, like say it's my company, right? I'm going to have buy-in because it's my company. Now, to get other people underneath me to get that buy-in, they have to feel like they have a piece in it. They have to have some skin in the game, or they have to have some intimacy with that business and that culture and that knowledge of what our bigger vision is or what our goal is. To get that buy-in, you have to connect with them at the heart. That goes back to previous episodes. We talk about empathy and talk about emotional intelligence and connected with people. Culture starts with that. You have to be able to connect with people and create relationships. If you can't create a relationship with those people under you, they're not going to have buy-in. It's your business, not theirs. So you got to be able to show them the bigger picture and the bigger vision of what it could create for them as well. It's got to be a partnership.
And most definitely, this right here, so I always respected you for that. You brought that to me personally. I take it personally. You brought that to me. You brought me a vision. You brought me the culture. Because before that, I didn't have no culture, dog. You knew this, dog. I was straight to the point. I didn't care. I'll tell you straight up. Didn't know how to talk to nobody. I didn't know how to approach people. I just told them straight up how I approached people in the streets was how I approached people at work. And it wasn't working for me. Everybody hated me, until you started, like you said, pulling me to the side and coaching me on it and telling me exactly what I needed. You tell me you need to learn the culture. You got to become part of the culture. Become part of the culture. You need to drink the Kool-Aid was what you always told me, right? Drink the Kool-Aid, dog. Don't be afraid to drink the Kool-Aid. And eventually I started going out a little more, started doing different things with the company, and I started getting the culture. I started being able to approach the people, being able to have those tough conversations that before I couldn't have it. If I had a conversation, people were trying to call HR because I said the wrong thing to them, but being able to learn that and being able to approach, now I got people to buy in, being able to bring my vision to them, but not, like you said, not only my vision, but their vision. What can they get from it? Where are they going to grow from me being able to reach that vision that I have? They also gain their vision, but also gain their growth. And that's what people are looking for, being able to grow with the company and know that they're not just a number, but they're going to be, a productive member of the organization and be able to do something more with their talents and all that, and that's super important to be able to do that.
You got to be able to find that balance, because you making that mind shift, when you first got there, it was me, my money, right? But you weren't getting nowhere. In order for you to get your money, you have to buy into the company vision. Every company has a goal. Every company has a vision. In order for you to succeed personally, you have to get the company. We have an obligation to the organization or company or whatever we work for or whatever we volunteer for. We have an obligation to them first and foremost, because without them, we don't have a job, we don't have a position, or we don't have an organization. Right? So it's about how I can gain myself by obtaining for other people or the company, right? And so a lot of people have to break that cultural side of it down and make it to where it's not about just them. They got to be able to see the bigger picture for the company. And then once they do, and then they start to learn the culture, and when you affect other people around you, you ultimately get what you want to do, right? Yes. Once you start talking to people right, and once you start building up other people around you, your job became exponentially easier.
Yes, correct.
Because you're over here working your ass off all the time, and other people weren't as talented, so you had to do all the work. Where now, you embracing other people and embracing the company culture, it made your job easier because now other people were buying in too. Yes. So now you didn't have to do 90 and they give 10. Yeah. Now it's more 50-50 or 60-40, whatever. Yeah. There's never going to be a 50-50 scenario. We've talked about that before too. It's always going to be someone's giving and someone's not able to give as much. But that mentality shift is from me to us. Yes. And that's what creates a culture, is making it about the collective group and going after that singular vision versus each individual's vision.
Yeah, and I was reading this book. It says instead of saying I, say we. When you say
100%.
we, it brings the people together. People want to go
Yep.
because they feel involved. And when you're able to bring people to be involved into the vision, into the game plan, people feel part of it and they want to work for it, you know. And Zig Ziglar says it best, you know, help others achieve their goals, and eventually your goals will become achievable.
Yep.
You know, help more, the more people you help, the closer you get to your goals. And that's
100%.
one of the parts that I love so much, you know, especially with this this company that we're with, you know. People ask me why I haven't left. Man, I came back for a reason, you know. It's something that I love. They embrace it, and, you know, being able to find people like you, mentors like you know, and other people like that bring that vision to you, that bring that culture, that pump you up and get you going, you know. It's something that's amazing. But let's get into this one. The difference between correction and humiliation.
You know, correction and humiliation is a big one, right? Humiliation is like calling people out in front of people and putting them down and making them feel like shit.
Yes.
You know, correction would be wrapping your arm around someone and say, hey, this is the way we actually do it, not the way you did it. Let me show you why. Or lead them by example, too. You know, they always say coaching in private, you know, and praise in public.
Yes.
And that's really, truly what it comes down to, correction versus humiliation. If you have a negative experience or an opportunity you're addressing with someone, that's a private conversation. Correct. You don't have to do that in front of everybody else and make people feel bad and make them feel dumb and really cut them down in front of their peers. You know, when you have praises, hell yeah, let everyone know you're kicking ass. Yeah. Because not only are you giving them a pat on the back, but now you're giving them a pat on the back in front of their peers so they can walk a little taller, they can chest out, you know, and it feels good. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, man, I'm going to work today. I'm going to really be a shitty employee. I think I'm going to get to work today. I'm going to suck at my job today. Nobody wakes up with that mentality. We all want to do well, you know, and some people just need an arm wrapped around them. And to be honest, when people fail, when I work with people and they fail, I take it personally. Not because they are not doing a good job, but because I didn't take my time to give them that crystal clear direction like I was talking about before. I didn't take my time to train you correctly. Yes. So it's not you messing up. I look at it as I failed you. And, you know, that's the difference in the culture, I think, that I create in the establishments that I've always worked at, where I'm at now, where I was before with you, where I was before at my previous job even. I always take it personal. When people fail around me, it's because did I help them enough? Did I do enough? Did I teach them everything I could do? And, you know, sometimes people will not have the skill, you know, and that's just the reality of life. So you have to put aces in places. Yeah. You may be a terrible cook, but you may be a killer bartender because you got personality. Maybe you can't get back there and multitask and slang out a bunch of dishes, but you have a big personality, and I put you in a bar and you're on display and you're showing showmanship and you're talking with guests and laughing and joking, and you might kill it in that position. You know, vice versa, where you take someone that's super outgoing and active and you're like, man, I'm going to make that person a meat cutter. They stand in that cooler at 36 degrees for 8 to 10 hours a day and don't talk to nobody. Yeah. You don't want someone that talks to a bunch of people. You need someone that's pretty to themselves and can just focus and self-starter and motivated. You know, so it's about aces in places, but correction needs to happen, you know, in a private setting. Correct. And it needs to not always be right then and there. It needs to be something where you can address it and say, hey, we're going to talk about that later, you know, and then pull people aside and have those conversations. And it shouldn't always be standing up. You know, I used to tell you all the time, hey, man, this is a table conversation. Yeah. You need to take someone and sit them down at a table, you and them, you know, look them in the eye and say, hey, you know, I'm disappointed. You know, when your dad get upset at you when you were a kid, right? What was worse, him being mad at you or disappointed in you?
Disappointed.
For sure, right? Yeah. Because then you feel bad. You're like, oh, man, I let him down. Yeah. Whereas if you're yelling, you're like, oh, man, dad's being an asshole again.
Yeah, correct.
You know, so it's more effective if we coach people in private and connect to them on a personal level, because it's not always about the job either. Sometimes they fail because they have outside circumstances affecting them, right? They might have something going on in their personal life, and that's when you can wrap your arm around people and really become a influential person in their life by connecting to them on a personal level, not just an employee or not just a number. You can say, hey, you know, what's going on? This isn't your typical, you know, and then they might tell you something. You might be able to wrap your arm around them, help them, you know, whether it's with mental health issue or whether it's someone pass away or whether it's, hey, I can't pay my rent. Hey, let me give you $200, man. Don't worry about rent. Let's get back to work, you know, and situations like that. I think that's where that coaching in private really becomes, because nobody's going to tell you those intimate things when you're in front of 30 other people. Correct. Like, hey, man, I'm just really having a mental health day. You ain't putting that on blast in front of 30 other people. No, most definitely. You know, and it just makes you feel like shit when you get put down and everyone's around, right?
When I go to work, I have that conversation too with someone. You know, I've been seeing it for a week now that, he ain't giving me his all. He's usually giving it his all, but I know he's going through something, so I gotta go have that personal conversation with him when I get to work today. But and something that I learned from you, bro, that I've gained. I watched you, I study your playbook, you feel me, and I learned a lot from you for doing that. Being able to sit down with people, correcting them. Something I love about your game plan, bro, is like we talked about it, but where you correct people when they did something terribly wrong. But you correct them, and they stand up, and they shake your hand and say thank you, And I'm like, damn, bro, that to me was crazy, Being able to see that, but seeing that aspect that you knew exactly what to tell them and how to coach them and how to bring them back up. You always tell them the good stuff, and then tell them, hey, this is what's been going on. What can we do to change that situation? What can I do to help you?
Yeah.
But that makes that person feel appreciated, valued, and that you take interest into their lives. Instead of I've seen management, tell people straight up, call them out. And I could say it because I used to do that, call people out in front of everybody until you pulled me to the side, like you said, put your arm over my shoulder and pulled me aside, told me, hey, have that table conversation, put your hands in your pocket, take them to a private place and coach them up instead of calling them out. Because when you call them out, people feel, like you said, a little disrespect. You feel me? A little disappointed.
They stop hearing what you're saying, too, because they immediately go into a defense mode.
Yes.
So what you say has no impact because it's in one ear and right out the other. Whereas if you go sit down at a table and you start asking thought-provoking questions instead of attacking their character, hey, how come this happened? What were you thinking when you made this decision? Yes. How could we have done that a different way to achieve a different result? When you start asking questions and connecting the dots on why they made the decision they made or how we got in this situation in the first place, it's a lot better than just, oh, you did that wrong. Because as soon as you hit that note, people defense mode and they stop listening. They don't care. They just think you're being an a-hole. Or they start coming up with excuses or playing the blame game. Well, so-and-so last Tuesday did that, and you didn't say nothing to them. And you got to draw those conversations. You've seen me have that conversation. Yeah. Hey, this conversation is about your performance, not that person's. I'll address that with that person. So it's funny, though, because I've been told that my whole life. One of my biggest qualities is my compassion. Yeah. Like people say I'm a very empathetic, compassionate person, and that's what makes me the leader I am because I have a big heart and I lead with my heart. That can also be my biggest downfall. And you know it. I mean, you've seen people, I'll give them 10, 12 chances, you know? And so I trust you till I don't trust you. And then I'll still give you another opportunity because I believe in grace. I believe in faith. I believe in, I don't think I would be where I'm at in my life if people didn't have grace with me. Yeah. And that comes down to my personal religious beliefs as well. Jesus Christ is King of all kings because he gives grace. And he gives grace freely. We're all sinners. We're all imperfect people and we're going to make mistakes. So I like to live my life by that same principle and give people grace and give them second chances. And that's what makes me the compassionate individual I am. But that's what drives my culture is my core beliefs in that. And I'm able to change lives. I mean, you're living testimony to that, right? If someone said that 10 years ago, where would you be at?
Working some random job, bro, somewhere else. Not doing what I'm doing today. And like you said, having that grace and compassion, all that, give me a second chance. Bro, you gave me a second chance to come back, and do my thing. I'm back in the same role I used to have, and it took a year for me to just put, like you said, put my head down and just work. And I grinded it out, being able to have that opportunity to be back in there, but now with more knowledge, but more compassion, more empathy towards people, and being able to connect more with the people, and the people are willing to do more for me because they know that I'm willing to have their back. As long as they got my back and they take care of me, I'm always going to take care of you no matter what. But they know that when they do something wrong, and at this point, sometimes someone that other guy, Alonzo, the other dude I do the podcast in Spanish with, he told me, he's like, most people are more afraid of disappointing you than they are disappointing themselves. 100%. And you just had told me that example, right? So people don't want to disappoint you. So when you coach them up and you tell them that, in their mind is already, how can I do it better? How can I get this better? How can I step up my game? What can I do to do it differently? And the next ones we kind of just went over it. It's like calling out potential versus calling out flaws, the power of public praising and private conversations. We just touched upon it, but people feel super powerful when you call out their potential. Hey, you're super good at this, and a lot of successful companies are growing and have gone to their point where they're at right now because they put aces in places. You don't got to be the best, and you've talked about it. If I suck at something, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on what I'm good at and find other people on my team that are good at what I suck at,
compliment it,
and be able to build up a team. And that's what's important when you're able to call out people's potential. That just gives them more fuel for the fire to keep on going. Compared to calling out the flaws, they're going to be pissed off all day, say this and that. And the biggest thing what you would always tell me is like, if you're gonna do a write up or anything, do it after work. He's like, because if you do it before work, that person's not gonna give 100%, you know. But yet again, I was able to learn how to approach that conversation with them no matter what. You know, I've been able to have conversation with people at the end of the day. Now the same thing happens to me. They give you, hey, thank you, I appreciate you for having this conversation with me. You know, instead of saying, just walking out and being pissed off and coming the next day with disgruntled and mad, you know, because of what happened, they come back happy, ready to give it their all, you know.
You can't fix what you don't know either.
Yes, correct.
You know, so if you're doing them an injustice by not having those conversations too, you know, and that drives the culture. Is that culture starts, you know, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is a great book. It talks about building culture, and the first pillar of it is trust. Yes. You know, if you don't have that trust to have those conversations, those courageous conversations that we've done an episode on before, then you're not going to have the culture. You got to be able to have each other's backs, and that means even you as the leader, people calling you out when you're wrong, you got to be able to take it just as well. But you just talked about someone's potential, you know, and a lot of leaders say people don't change, and they take people for face value. Yes. Like, oh, that's just who Juan is, right? Yes. Well, yeah, you are who you are now, but 10 years ago, were you the same Juan? Nope. No, we all grow. We all change. We all evolve. That's the whole point of life. We all are continually learning. There's no destination at the end until you take that last breath, you know, and then you go to your final destination. So it's like, if we're all growing and continually learning, I don't always look at people for face value and who you are now. I look at your past. I look at your character, what built you. I look at the things that drive you. Yes. You know, whether it's your family, whether it's money, whether it's fame, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, it drives you. I try and find that why factor to get you motivated to get to your potential. Yes. And in order to do that, I have to know what makes you tick first. Yes. That's those personal conversations, like when you're correcting people and finding out, you know, what's causing it. That's what leads me to the compassion and the empathy and being able to connect to people on a deeper level. Because now if I know you on a deeper level, I can influence you on a deeper level. Yes. And I can get you to do things that are better for you, which are also better for the company or better for myself or whatever. And we can do things in unison as a team versus you being all about you, and me being all about me. You know, now we're able to collectively get to a vision and be mutually beneficial in a partnership with each other, whether it's for the company, organization, friendships, relationships, whatever it is. You have to have that deep-rooted connection. So, yeah, I like to bring people's potential out, you know?
Yeah, most definitely, you know. And like you said, I'm a living testament, you know, being able to push out that the full potential of me and being able to push me to be able to do those things. And at one point I didn't even think I could do it, you know. Now I'm over here always coaching people up, always trying to build people's potential and trying to make them become the best possible them they can possibly be. Yeah. You know, and like you said, it's not about me no more. It's not I no more. It's we. What can we do? What can I do for you? How can I help you be able to get to where you're going? Hey, what's going on? What is bothering you? What can we fix? What's in my control to be able to help you? You know, and just learning about that is, shoot, bro, shot me up in my career so fast, you know. And like I said, first time I did it quick, but this time I'm doing it the right way. You know, first time
slow it down, reckless. Man. There's no shortcut to success. There's no shortcut to build a muscle. Like, you have to go to the gym, you have to work it out. Same thing with leadership, same thing with success. Like, people don't just wake up, oh, I'm a billionaire, I'm a millionaire. Like, it takes work, and it goes back to that whole mentality, that first book I ever gave you, that chop wood, carry water, you know, and these are all fundamental things that kind of build into a bigger picture of leadership in general. But that culture conversation, I mean, you can't get places with a terrible culture because people don't want to come in and work for the bigger picture with a terrible culture. So that's why we're talking about culture today, because it's like you have to create that environment for people to succeed and feel comfortable and feel heard and feel seen and be excited to go and do something. I'll be honest, where I'm at now, like, I took over a very successful store from a guy that was very good at what he did. So walking in, you have a little bit of nerves, and you're like, man, how do you follow in those footsteps? How do you get to that level? And it's like, man, I just don't want to F it up. Yeah. You know, but going in there, I definitely think that culture is my biggest asset. Culture is going to be the thing that helps me succeed, and not just keep it the same, but hopefully grow it. Yeah. You know, hopefully make it bigger and better. Yes. Because that's something I've always been talented with is rallying people and making them feel good about themselves and showing people their potential like you're talking about, and not just elevating my team, elevating the company, but elevating individuals and changing lives. And that's really what my passion is. I think everyone knows that. People development. You know, I said to a guy one time when I was first promoted to an MP, you know, he came and did a store visit, and he's like, what do you want to be known for? And I told him, I was like, look, man, I'm a low-volume store. I'll never be known for number one in sales. Yeah. I'll never be that guy that's number one in sales. But I want to develop people. I want to get people out there. I want to promote people. I want to change people's lives. So now here I am running, you know, a top sales store. Yeah. And it's like now I'm known for sales too. But at the same time, people development's always been my passion. I want to keep focusing on that. You know, sales will be, it'll come because of that. So I'm not focused on the sales as much as I am on the people. The people will bring the sales, and people will bring the culture, and people will bring those wins every day if you focus on the culture. And that's what I'm driving right now, is the culture.
Yeah, most definitely. You know, you are known for that. Like you said, you're running one of the top stores now. You know, you develop people. We know, as a team, we've developed a lot of people to get pumped out and go to different stores and do that. You know, and it's an amazing feeling now, you know. One of the reasons I started doing it too was because I seen what satisfaction you get from being able to help someone and get them to their full potential and seeing them thrive and do what they need to do.
Changes lives.
You know, changing people's lives is super important to me. At first, like you said, for me it was all about money. Now it's not even about money. It's about how many people can I help, how many things, you know. And that's what I focus on. It's like money comes regardless of what I do. You know, I always make money, but the fact that me helping someone change their lives, and it's in our title, legacy, you know, legacy leaders, you know, we're trying to leave a legacy, and we can leave a legacy with those people, you know. And I'll give a prime example right now, because I'm not sure if you've seen it. Nipsey Hussle just got his whole neighborhood, Nipsey Hussle Square, you know, and that to me is amazing, you know. He's not here no more, but that legacy he left.
And it's a positive reform in that neighborhood where he came up really rough too. You know, so you see it a lot of times too with like professional athletes. Yeah. Like there's a lot of professional athletes out there that, you know, they grew up and they had a rough situation. Their parents really gave them all to afford to be able to put them in camps and put them on teams or travel ball or whatever it is. And the first thing they do is they go and buy like cars and chains and stupid shit. And then you see the other side of it, and there's athletes out there that are so quiet about it because they don't pump it out to social media. They don't do that, right? And they go out there and they change neighborhoods and they build tiny homes, and all of a sudden they got a village for homeless people, and then they're giving back to schools. And you know, we've had this conversation before, like who's the greatest basketball player of all time? Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. Who is it? It doesn't matter. You know, when it comes to the court, that's great. You know, everyone knows my opinion. MJ's the GOAT. You know, Kobe's second for me because he basically there would be no Kobe Bryant without MJ. But there is something to be said about LeBron James and his off the court presence, man. That dude has done a lot. You know, socioeconomically, like the schools in Ohio and some of the things that he's created and those youth foundations and changing the world. So, you know, you look at, as a basketball player, maybe LeBron James is a number one. But you look at the outside philanthropic effort that he put in building schools and things like that, that dude is no doubt, he changed lives. And that's what it's about, creating that legacy. So I can't sit here and say he's number one in basketball, but I'll tell you, legacy-wise, that dude's put his name on the map, and he's done some really good things for inner city children and stuff like that, man. So I got to give him credit where it's due on that one.
Know, and I brought up Nipsey because we talk about culture. He brought culture to his neighborhood.
100%.
You know? He brought culture to the LA environment, bro, gangs and all this other stuff, and he gave back. You know, he brought a vision. He brought his vision out here to the gangs and to all this, and beefing stopped. You know, when he passed away, everybody united, bro. But that's what you want to see. You want to see that culture, that
positive environment,
you know,
in the community
and that's super important. And you talk about it, you know, about a lot of people buy all this stuff, but you really look at him. He built a legacy, bro. And I always talk about Nipsey Hussle because all his music is straight, all his blueprints, everything is straight to his family. His family gets all the money, so he built a legacy. But like I said, he brought the culture to the LA environment, bro. You know, Browns. Everybody, it was a united thing, culture, just melting pot culture right there, that just all united for one person who brought that love, that showed respect to everybody. Again, build up so much things as well, you know, and that's why it's super important to build that culture, you know. People, you unite people when you bring that culture. You change the environment of where you're at when you bring that culture, you know, and being able to do that on a big platform like he did, bro, it's like, it's amazing. Like I said, he just, his neighborhood got his name now. It's not, you know, Crenshaw, it's Nipsey. And that to me is like, bro, that's what people should be shooting for, you know. It's like being,
and it's in positive reform. It's not in a negative light. You know, came from a really rough background in the gangs and the gang culture and the street life, and then turned into a hip hop artist, and really his music touched a lot of those people because he touched their souls and was empathetic, and you know, he showed grace because he'd been through it too, right? So we were talking about grace earlier, like he didn't judge people for that because he came from the same situation, but he's able to flip the script on that and make it a positive thing. Now some of these kids growing up, they're not going to be joining gangs and stuff. They're going to be looking at his positive reform that he did, and that's going to be the driving focus for them moving forward, is trying to do the same thing in their neighborhoods.
Let's get into the next one. The culture you tolerate is the culture you build. Culture isn't accidental. If sarcasm, disrespect, and belittling are tolerated, that becomes the norm. If growth, accountability, and belief are spoken daily, that becomes identity.
You know, if you see something, say something. We've talked about it before. If you see someone putting someone else down, like you get in there and you know, it's a culture that you have to be able to understand the sarcasm and putting people down. And I can't talk to everyone the same way, right? Like me and you can sit here and bullshit as good friends, and I'll be talking smack to you, you be talking smack to me. We might make some mama jokes or whatever, right? No disrespect, mama. I'm just throwing it out there. You know, there might be some jokes back and forth and stuff like that, but it's not in a negative light. I think the sarcasm that you're speaking about is when it comes to passive aggressive. You throw in little punches instead of the accountability, instead of having those courageous conversations. Hey, come here real quick, let's talk about your performance. It's when you start undermining and throwing those little pokes in there, you know, that get under people's skin, and then they start believing that stuff. So the sarcasm that I think you're speaking to isn't like when we're joking around having a good time, right? Like when we're joking around having a good time, it's different. Now, there's a time and place for that. We busy, we cranking out, we doing some business. It's not the time or place for that. Now it's time to, hey, let's grind it out, man. Let's get on the same page. Let's roll it. You know, obviously we can razz each other and joke back and forth and stuff, and still create that culture, you know, fun and going back and forth. But it's the negative connotation that comes out of people speaking, like we were talking about earlier, like correcting in private, you know, coaching in public or praising in public. That's really what I think you're talking about here, is not throwing little shots. You know, it's when people make back-ended comments, you know, and it's like they're trying to put you down, but without putting you down, they're being passive aggressive. And it's because you don't have the nuts to say that shit to my face. Say it. I'm a grown ass man. You know, and if you got a problem, let's step out here and talk about it real quick and figure out what the solution is. You know, and I think that's what it comes down to a lot of times, is people throw those jokes, you know, and sarcasm in there because they got something to say, but they don't have the nuts to say it. I think that's a lot of it. So, but culture, like I said, is built on trust. So you got to be able to call me on my shit just like I got to call you on your shit. So if there's an issue, it should be like, hey man, come here real quick, let's go talk. You know, because you and me have gotten into it. Like, people don't understand. Like, we're close, but we've gotten into it probably more than most people that I work with, you know. And someone else that I used to work with too, man. Carl was the same way. And Carl would go rounds, bro. Like, I remember me and him got into it one time, and Travis looked up at me, and he's like, he was coming up to say something. He didn't even want to come up. He's like, nah, I'm not getting involved in that. You know, but by the end of that conversation with me and him, we shook hands at the end, and we got right back to work on the same goal. You know, sometimes you got to be able to have those conversations, but I'm not one to poke at. You know, I don't like the little back-ended comments and stuff like that. Hey, you got something to say it. You know, if I agree with you, maybe it's something I need to hear at the time. Maybe it's something like, hey, yeah, you're right, I'm messing up. All right, cool. Heard, loud and clear, got you. You know, other times I might be like, dude, let me holler at you out here real quick. Let's go talk for a second. But that's where that conversation comes in, as far as like the criticism and passive. Like, I can't stand passive aggressive stuff. You know what I mean? Like, you got something to say it with your chest. If you believe it and you got conviction in what you're actually saying, come out and say it. You know, and I'll respect you more for it. Even if I disagree with you, I'll respect your opinion. But when you're putting little pokes and stuff like that and disguising disrespect as a joke, that's when it's a problem. Like, when you're disrespecting someone because you're joking with them, you know, that's, oh no, I'm just kidding. Obviously there's some truth in that joke. Like, correct. You wouldn't say that if you didn't feel that to a point, right? So let's hash that out real quick.
You know, and that's something that we didn't tolerate, disrespect or none of that. You cut that straight right there. Hey, let's go.
For anybody.
You know, if you had to handle that situation, a couple situations that way over here, you know, working over here in this area, but, you know, you handle it the right way. But, you know, it's no one should tolerate disrespect, because that kills your culture, that kills your environment. If you let someone disrespect someone, guess what? Now other people are gonna do it, and that's just gonna build up that animosity in that environment, and it's not gonna be a friendly environment no more. It's gonna be a hostile environment. You know, so like you said, it's sarcasm in a good way is right, you know, but doing it and trying to belittle someone, trying to make them feel that like they're nothing, that's not fine, you know. But being able to hold that accountable and and having, you know, shutting that down first and foremost. You know, like you said, most people don't really know that me and you used to go at it. You know, yeah, we had our good times, we smack, joke, and all that stuff. But those points where we went close head to head, you know, where we both are very passionate about what we do. We want to win, and sometimes that brought us into an argument. You know, and we both gave our sides, but right after that conversation, we just walk away like, okay, let's get back to making money, bro. You know.
But that's the difference, though, because we were able to resolve it, right?
Yes.
You were talking about the animosity. The problem in a lot of cultures nowadays is that animosity builds and it festers, and people never let it come to a head. Yeah. They never actually fix the issue. So I'm dealing with some things like that right now, personally, that, you know, it was never resolved. Like, things are like, oh, you know, he's mad, he'll get over it. A couple days later, they just start talking like everything was fine, but they never resolved that issue. Yes. But 3 months from now, when that happens again or something else happens, it's going to blow up again. Yes. It's going to be like, oh, well, 3 months ago they did this. Well, yeah, because you never resolved it. Where if you resolved it, if 3 months later something else happens, you know, hey, we resolved that. You're not going to bring up the past. You're gonna talk about a current issue, yes. Right? So the animosity builds and festers a lot of times because we just brush shit under the rug, and you're like, oh no, it'll fix itself. Things don't fix themselves, man, because people have a steel trap. They all are going to remember. Yes. When you burn someone, they're going to remember you burned them. You know, and people remember those conversations. It doesn't matter how long. It could be 2 years and be like, hey, remember that one time? Yeah. You know, and so they remember that. So from a culture standpoint, they're also going to remember how it was resolved. Yes. So if you like you said, me and you would get in arguments and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, man, it was done. It was hashed out. We were good. We moved on. So there's no lost love. There's no animosity moving forward where like 2 years from now, I'm like, oh man, Juan, he's just an asshole. Yeah. Oh man, Ben, he's an asshole. That's just how he is. Yeah. You know, it was never built up to that because it was never brushed under the rug. It was always, you know, handled in the moment or handled shortly thereafter when we cooled down. You know, but that's where a lot of that culture comes in, though, is people just avoid those conversations. Yeah. So the culture is cracked because the trust is cracked. Like I was talking about, that's the first pillar. You know, if you don't have that trust to have those conversations, then it's going to hurt your culture every time because people are going to hold that in the back of their mind until it is resolved.
And that's one thing. Now, we laugh about the situations we've had. But this one time we did this, oh yeah, that was super funny, you know. But being able to resolve that in that instant, you know, don't let it hold on because eventually it's a ticking time bomb. We talked about it, you know, it's going to pop off, it's going to explode, and that eventually affects the whole team, you know, affects the whole team, the culture, the vibe, everything goes down, and the workplace ain't what it's supposed to be, you know, being able to resolve those situations right then and there, being able to hash it out, make sure everything's squashed, and hey, you know what, you guys, is it good? You know, move forward. Let's leave that in the past. Let's focus on the present and be able to build up on it, you know. But standards are reinforced through language. Leaders set emotional temperatures, and every energy follows vocabulary.
Energy does follow vocabulary. I think you have to build people up and praise them in public, like we just talked about. The language is important, and that's why you set the vision, and that's why you have those cultural posters or whatever we were talking about on the wall earlier, because that language really is what drives the vision and the culture. Without that language associated to it, it's hard to visualize it. So the language associated with it is what's creating that crystal clear picture of what you want in your organization, for your culture, for your goal, for your vision, whatever it is. So upholding those standards really comes down to the verbiage of how you're implementing the culture and then how you hold accountable the culture and keep those standards where they're at and not accept lower than what your standards are. If you start accepting lower than what your standards are, then you're creating that culture and you're changing that culture. You know, where you set the standards up top and now you hold the accountability. Now you use the language and articulate it in crystal clear and say, this is our expectation. You know, we want to have fun, but in order to have fun, we still got to meet X, Y, Z, you know, and that's what it comes down to.
Let's get into the last and final segment right here, how to build people with words. You know, call out effort, not just results. I see your growth.
You got to be able to show people when they're kicking ass, man. You know, call it out. Let them know. Pat them on the back. Show them the energy. Give them the love. You know, give credit where it's due. Don't take other people's credit. You know me. I'm big on that. Like if we do something good, it's as a team. The team killed it. They did great. It's never, you know, Ben did this, Ben did that. I'm not a huge person to take credit unless it's something that we messed up. And then I'm like, hey, that's my fault. I'm the leader. That's me. Even if it's not my own, it's not me that did it. It's like, hey, I allowed it to happen. You know, we talked about that this morning.
Yeah.
If something happens, that's my fault. But if it's something good, it's collectively, you have to let your team know, hey, great job, guys. Good job. Pat people on the back. You know, if someone had a brilliant idea, give them the credit. Like, hey, that was Juan's idea. He did this. He did that. And don't steal people's thunder, but build them up. You know, the language is really what comes down to it, and that's what builds that relationship too.
Yep. You know, speak future into people. You're capable of leading this.
Future's about the vision. It's about creating the potential we talked about, right? You wouldn't be sitting here in the position you're in if I didn't show you what you could be. Yeah. I knew what you could be before you knew what you could be. You didn't even believe in yourself until I came along, probably. You believed in money and hustle and I'm going to get money, but you didn't believe in who you were on the inside and what you could potentially do. Remember, I sat you down. I was like, dude, people look to you like a leader. You don't even know it yet. You know, do you want to be a manager? You want to keep looking over your shoulder doing stupid shit, you know? And so creating that potential in people and really casting vision for them in their personal life and asking what they want, what their goals are. Are they happy where they're at? Some people are perfectly happy where they're at, and that's fine too. You know, if you're happy where you're at, great. You know, be the best you can be. Yeah. You know, and if you're happy punching the clock 40 hours, going home and relaxing the rest of your week, cool. Yeah. You know, there's a place in the world for all of that. You know, sometimes it's not about money. Sometimes it's not about fame. Sometimes it's not about status. Sometimes it's about, you know, I got my 40, I paid my bills, I go home to my family, and I'm happy with what I got. And that's okay, too. So you got to know each individual's vision and goals, and then see what their potential is and how can I get you to that level. You know, some people have no idea what they want to do. They're just waking up every day doing whatever they do, you know. So it's on you as a leader to show people what they can make of themselves and how we can change the world one person at a time. And that goes back to that starting with the man in the mirror. We've had that conversation in that episode. And so start with yourself and then branch out and show people potential around you.
You know, that right there, you know, being able to speak that vision into people. You know, like you said, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be able to do this podcast. I wouldn't be able to stand in front of people, be able to, you know, have a successful career from the lifestyle that I did have, because I didn't believe in myself. I didn't know none of that, but you brought that vision. You saw that potential in me, and you showed me a future that I never saw in my life. I didn't picture myself being able to have a house and living this lifestyle that I lived, because all I knew was the streets. But now you painted that picture. Now I feel like it's on, you know, the Ed my lit. We're capable of helping the people we once were, you know, and now it's my job. You did it for me. Now it's my job to start doing it with other people and start helping people like you help me, help other people come up and grow and be able to leave that lifestyle that they have and do something better, and casting that future to them and showing them, you know, you can have this lifestyle if you really want it. If you want to leave what you're doing right now, well, you can. I'm a living proof. You know, you're living proof that we were able to leave that and move forward. But correct with dignity. This doesn't match your standard.
Yeah, I mean, correct it with dignity. I mean, it goes back to that humility part of it too, and just owning where people are in their personal lives and stuff like that, and knowing where you came from. You know, I can't pass judgment on nobody else because I've been there. You know, so it's like anytime I correct someone, I want to make sure they leave with their head held high. Yeah. You know, so it's not about just the negative. Hey, this is wrong. We need to fix it. It's about, hey, you are valued. Yeah. You know, you see these hoodies, you know, the suicide prevention hoodies and stuff like that just say you're enough on the back. Yeah. That's 100% correct. That's accurate. You know, so even if you're correcting someone, you got to make sure they understand they're enough. They are who they are. They hold value in this world. Everybody was made for a reason. And so correcting people with dignity, that's what it comes down to for me. Making sure people understand they are enough. Yeah. Their mistakes don't define them, right? I lead by grace, like I said, by faith. And that's really what it's about.
You know, repeat vision constantly. Culture dies when vision goes silent.
That's where those posters and stuff come in handy, man. It's in your face, you know. And then, like we talked about the language part of it, language is a big part of it. You know, you have to over-articulate. When you see something that's not in line with your vision, you got to bring it back in line and call it when you see it. And you got to be able to correct those things. And if you're walking by it, you're part of the problem. Yes. If you see something that's not in line with your vision and you allow it to happen, you just allowed that to happen. Now you're creating your own accountability and standards, and you're lowering it. So you have to be able to call it like you see it, man. Yeah. And sometimes that's in a great positive way, and it's a pat on the back. And other times it's a pull them in private, like we talked about coaching in private. You know, sometimes it's one of those conversations, but you have to be able to see it and say something.
You know, and having that vision die out, you know, is super not important not to let it die out, because when it dies out, like I said, you know, when the vision people lose vision, when the town loses vision, the people perish, you know. it's like your team starts dying out. You have turnover rates. People start just leaving, and all this disgruntled employees and all this stuff. When you let that vision die, and you got to keep on casting that vision. You got to keep on showing them the vision and telling them, hey, this is what we're shooting for. This is what we need. What we got to do. What do we need to do better? As a team, what can we do better?
You have to be able to influence people, though, first and foremost.
Yes.
And if you can't influence people through your character and the way you live your life and the way you lead your organization or your team or your relationship or whatever, then you're not going to get the vision anyway. So you first have to start with the man in the mirror. Again, you have to be able to cast vision first with yourself. You have to be able to uphold those standards yourself. You can't say something and do something completely different.
Correct.
You have to lead by example. You have to live by example. So for me to cast a vision that I'm not currently living, everyone else around me is like, he doesn't do it. Why would I do it? So you have to start with this self accountability in that vision, and then cast it out to other people. And the influence dies if you don't hold yourself accountable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that right there, that to me is one of the most important fundamentals, being able to do that, but also lead by example, being able to lead by example is basically what you're saying right there, being able to lead by example and showing people what you're doing and showing the vision and showing that everything can come out correctly and in the right manner. I got 2 questions for you. Have you ever been built up by one sentence that changed your life?
One sentence that changed my life. Man, I don't know. That's a hard one, dude. I mean, I think you kind of know my story. I think the biggest thing for me has always been, am I better today than I was yesterday? Yep. That's the biggest thing for me. And I think someone told me that one time, and it just kind of resonated with me. And every day I think about it. I think about it every day. But I really like that Ed Milet quote. You're the most qualified to teach the person you used to be or help the person you used to be. That's a big one for me. When I heard that from Ed Milet, I was like, man, that's exactly what I've been doing all these years, but put into words. I'm able to connect with those diamonds in the rough and people that had a rough background, and whether it was drugs, alcohol, or split parents, or different things, right? Trouble with the law, kids that got expelled or suspended in school, or those are always the people that I've connected with because I feel like I can help them because I was there. I was there once, and now I'm not there, and it's like so that quote from Ed Milet is probably the one that hits the hardest for me right now because it takes everything that I've encompassed and put it into words.
Let me give you the second. What's the most damaging phrase a leader can say?
That's a hard one, man. I think not believing in yourself, not believing in them. I think that's the biggest one is you can't do it. You can't. Because if you say you can or you can't, you're right. So if someone says you can't do something, that's a hard one for a leader to say. But there's a cliche saying like that, but also at the same time, that's kind of what fueled my fire. Because when people tell me I can't do something, I'm the type that's like, watch me do it, hold my beer, like I'm gonna go do it twice. So I think it kind of depends on the personality of the person that's being told that too. And some people want to prove people wrong, and that's what motivates them.
You've been grinding it out, doing work out there, up north, changing. Your life has been changing, it's going to change even more with more success coming along. But what do you want a message to the people, bro?
Man, just keep believing in yourself and keep hustling, keep grinding, but don't try and take shortcuts. Experience, there's no shortcut for experience. You can't go to the gym and just have muscles on day one. You have to put in the work. You have to really drive yourself and hold yourself accountable, number one, and then hold high standards around you. And just make sure that you bring people with you. It's not about you. It's about them. It's about other people. So take other people with you. Is it a goal for you or is it a goal for the common good? So the biggest thing for me is just, like I said earlier, following my faith in Jesus Christ and taking his mentality of grace and teaching people to walk in the likeness of Jesus Christ and being able to change the world one person at a time. And that's really what I would tell people is live your life like Jesus would, and everything else around you gets exponentially easier.
Yes. You can be the leader that people fear or the leader that people grow under. Your words are either shaping warriors or creating wounds. Legacy leaders build people so strong they no longer need constant validation. And with that, we're out.